I'm pleased to note that in 2000, Business Week magazine had a cover that said, "Too much corporate power?" question mark. And it answered yes, yes, yes in 6 detailed pages. And then it had an editorial. It reported a poll of the American people. 71% said corporations have too much control over their lives. And that's before the corporate crime wave that started with Enron and went to Wall Street, looting and draining trillions of dollars from worker pensions and small investors. You can imagine what that poll would be today. 81% of the people in a poll a few days ago said country's going in the wrong directions. Who's driving the country in the wrong directions? Last I heard, hundreds of millions of people in North America and South America and around the world, they're doing their daily work, sweating it out. Who's driving the U.S. in the wrong direction? It's corporate power that's doing it. Corporate crime, corporate fraud, corporate abuse. It's a runaway corporate system. It is above the law, beyond the law. It makes the law. It's not an equal playing field. This is the central issue of the campaign. It's got to be corporate power. They have no moral sense. You think corporations have meetings saying, what should be our policy to get out of Iraq? You think Exxon has a board meeting saying, we're a U.S. chartered corporation, we should take a position on Iraq? They could care less. The only interest they have in Iraq is to keep control of the oil. The only interest Halliburton has in Iraq, or Blackwater, is to keep those contracts coming so they can rip off the taxpayer, endanger our soldiers, and keep renewing their contracts to keep their stock up so they can pay their executives higher salaries. So we have to have a higher estimate of our own significance. Very easy. Turn this country around. We start with a country that's full of problems they don't deserve and solutions on the shelf we don't apply. We start with a country where we have 535 people in the Congress, the most powerful turnaround institution in the history of our country. Controls budgets, controls whether we can go to war or not. It controls health and safety standards. It controls whether we're going to have adequate housing for poor people, public transit, you name it. 535. In every congressional district, there's 600,000 people, men, women, children. Why can't we organize 2,000 people in every congressional district into a Congress watchdog organization? Call it a civic hobby. People have done far more difficult things in their daily life. They've taken care of their illness in the family. They've taken care of children who are difficult to raise. They've been in accidents. They've had to make ends meet, and they're behind 6 months on their payments. Those are very difficult things they have to contend with compared to joining a Congress watchdog group. For heaven's sake, just look at the bird watchers, how intense they are. They want to watch birds. We want to watch Congress. That's one way to turn Congress around. One way to get out of Iraq. One way to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. One way to stand tall before the world so we can become a humanitarian superpower, not just the biggest export of death-dealing weapons to countries around the world and to dictators who repress their own people with these weapons and sometimes turn it against our own soldiers. That's one turnaround. Is that beyond our range of imagination and civic intensity? Of course not. We're just not imagining it. We're not projecting it. We don't have a high estimate of our own significance as people in this country to take control of our destiny and our future. The second way we can change this election, this is even easier. These major candidates go through cities. They campaign. They're going to come to Chicago. So why not form a coalition, an ad hoc coalition of neighborhood groups, labor unions, student organizations, League of Women Voters, Urban League, maybe some countercultural small business groups, get together, have a letterhead, and basically say to the major candidates, we represent hundreds of thousands of voters in Chicago, at least. And we are inviting you when you come to town to a public auditorium where we're going to put our agenda on your table and you're going to respond to it. And we're going to have you ask us questions and we're going to ask you questions. And maybe you'll never have heard these questions before in your entire political career, but there's always a time for everything to begin. Now, look at that. You have the press covering it. They can't ignore you because you represent too many people, too many groups, too many workers, too many students, too many active neighborhood citizens. And you changed the balance of power in the campaign. They will no longer be able to control you with 3 or 4 issues that they drum beat across the country in a vague way. And they will have to be responsive to a shift of power in the presidential dialogue itself. You don't think we can do this around the country? Of course we can. Let me end on this note. You go back to the 19th century, when the Whigs and the Democrats were the 2 major parties until 1854. And afterwards, when the Republicans and Democratic parties were the 2 major parties. When you hear somebody say that they want to vote for winners, and they keep losing, they keep telling us, the 2 parties, vote for winners, and we keep losing. But when they say to you, you know, a third-party candidate, an independent candidate, you know, let's be realistic. Ask them this question. Aren't they glad that there were a number of voters in the 1840s who didn't go for the least worst between the Whigs and the Democrats on the issue of slavery and voted for the Liberty Party, which was an anti-slavery abolitionist party? Aren't they glad that a certain number of voters didn't vote for the least worst on women's right to vote between the 2 major parties in the 19th century and voted for the parties that were pressing for the women's right to vote, which the industrialists opposed because women were the leading reformers to abolish child labor and to tame some of the hard sides of the Industrial Revolution with their marches and demonstrations? Aren't we glad that there were several million voters who cut out from the Republican and Democratic parties and voted for the Greenback Party, the Labor Party, the Populist Party, the Farmers Party in the 19th century? Because they're the ones who never won a national election, but they're the ones who pioneered the great social justice movements that we now take for granted. And so I urge you to continue to contact your friends, to join our email lists, to volunteer, provide us with your technical capability, and to make your contributions. We take no commercial money. We take no political action committee money. We get more out of $10 than the other campaigns get out of $100 because they're very frugal. We don't have political consultants to pay these enormous fees to. In other words, we're campaigning with the people, for the people, of the people, by the people, in ways that are prudent, honest, and focused on the future directions of our country.